All right, we are live. Hello, everyone. Tom Tabor here, Winning Mindset Formula. I'd like to introduce a very special guest today, Brianna Barron. Bri, why don't you introduce yourself to everyone?
Hi, everyone. Um, so I'm Tom's girlfriend, and this is my first time on his podcast. First female on his podcast, too.
Yep, big day, big day. Breaking down barriers. But yeah, so a little background. So Bri is actually, believe it or not, the inspiration for this whole podcast. So Jonathan and I have shared before. One day we were watching football together, and we were just I guess the best way of describing it is shooting the shit about what's going on, like at our jobs and stuff like that. And then, meanwhile, Bree's seeing me basically point out everything that's going on in the game, and she basically stops. Like, I don't know if you want to call it complaining or whatnot.
I would say I was probably like lecturing you. It was like I was kind of it was probably a little harsh, but it was all in good love because like Tom, you probably heard from other episodes. Tom is literally an expert in football. Like he knows almost anything and everything, and like he has all this knowledge, and he's obsessed with football. And
Obsessed.
so to just like he comes home, or I come home, or we both come home, and he wants to show me like some plays, and like he wants to tell me about the 49er news, and like it's not that I don't want to hear all these things,
Like, what's the
but
tea? What's the gossip going on in San Francisco right now? But yeah, that's basically it. Or like I'll show some like NFL classic or something like that. But yeah, basically I roped you into my entire football life.
Yeah. And like
But
there's nothing wrong with that, but I'm just like, this guy clearly has a passion for football, and he's literally an expert. Like how often can you say when like you not only have extreme passion for something and you're also like an expert in it, and it's just like that's like a recipe for like something that you can do in life. And I'm just like, you're just sitting on this couch, like talking to these people, talking to me who like doesn't really know very much. And, honestly, I'm not saying I don't care, but I don't care nearly as much as you do. So, like, I'm like, you need to do something with this. Like, it's a waste. So that I pretty much kind of like, it wasn't like yelling, it was more like lecturing,
it
like,
was a call. It was a call to action, basically.
yeah.
So call to action to get me to do what I love, and that's be involved with the game of football in some capacity. Thus started the Winning Mindset Formula podcast, where yes, it's the perfect combination of mindset, but also football, which is probably the most important theme to this podcast. But anyways, so Brie, I know you've been probably our biggest fan. You've been watching most of our recent episodes. So as you know, we brought on a ton of guests recently. Some guests that will always have, very special place in my heart. We were connected at some point in time in our lives. And there's a lot of great themes we can bring from each guest that we brought on. And do you have an overall message about the guests that we had, or overall thoughts? Or do you want to just go guest by guest and kind of break it down from there?
Let's do that question at the end. We can ask like maybe who our favorite person was, or maybe the theme, because I feel like doing it in the beginning. I don't
Well,
know. I
they're all
just
our favorite people. So,
yeah. I mean, I guess.
but yeah, we can break it down by guest. So I'd like to start out with Kevin Folds. So recapping Kevin Folds. So Kevin and I were together when I was in prep school at Worcester Academy back in 2014, 2015. So Kev ended up doing a prep year like me, and then he ended up signing at Wagner College to play football there. He got pretty much a full scholarship there. Ended up playing there for about a year and a half, and then he decided that there needed to be a change. He just wasn't happy in life, so he made a change. Went from football to baseball, transferring to Ramapo College So he wasn't getting so at that level, there's no athletic assistant, like there's no athletic financial aids, there's no athletic scholarships. It would have to be some academic aid or whatnot to help you out. But he made a sacrifice. So one of the big themes was definitely sacrifice. He sacrificed having his tuition paid for 4 years. He sacrificed that for happiness to go to Ramapo, which was closer to home for him, and to play baseball, which ended up being probably his true passion. Ended up having more passion for that than football. So that was one of the main themes in that. And then another big theme to touch on would be accountability. So in life, it is important for all of us to be accountable for all of our actions. So Kevin was accountable for his mistakes. He understood that he was at Worcester Academy because it was his own fault. He just didn't have the grades, didn't have the focus when he was in high school to be eligible to play Division 1. So he ended up taking accountability, taking ownership for those actions. And then when he was at Worcester Academy, he ended up flipping the switch and it was ultimate focus to become academically eligible to play Division 1 football, which he succeeded in doing. And then another big theme, which is actually a common theme with a lot of the guests that we had, was overcoming injury. So Kevin suffered a devastating knee injury when we were at Worcester Academy. It was halfway through the season, and it's a moment I'll never forget because both of us got hurt on that same play. And we're right next to each other. We're right guard and right tackle. So he broke his knee. Like there was legit a chip in the bone in his knee. And I ended up breaking my foot on the very same play. So it was a pretty dramatic scene. We were both lying down right next to each other. And I'm just hearing Kevin screaming. And it was just, ugh. That sound was just, it sounded like he was in a lot of pain. And just knowing the severity of the injury, that was a tough one to come back from. I know it seemed like it took several months for him to just even walk normally. But you know what? He ended up getting healthy and didn't miss a beat. Actually got to play some games in his freshman year at Wagner. But yeah, we can touch on each of those themes. So Bree, let's start with accountability. So what did you think about the accountability piece of that?
So I have a question. Would he have been able to play? He was in Division One, right? So Division One football, um, without like, would if his grades were good enough, would he have been able to like get in to?
Yes. So he
So
already had schools that were going to offer him. So I know Boston College was on the table. I think UNH in Maine as well. So he was going to have those offers. It he wasn't going to be eligible because of his grades.
so that's a point that I want to bring up because by not being a good student in school and not being focused, he lost a year of his life. And also, I shouldn't say lost a year of his life. It's not like it's a waste to go to prep school, but like,
It does feel like it though. I mean, we're especially when we're there, it's like we're all thinking like, dude, what the hell are we doing here?
but like so what's that saying? Like basically, you had the easy life, but then you had to make up for it later and it became a hard life because you made the easy choices. But if you make the hard choices, then you'll have an easier life. It would have made his life,
A lot easier to go
marginally
through.
easier, not
Yep.
having to go to prep school and use up that year that he could have spent, you know, maybe his injury would have never happened. Maybe he wouldn't have
Exactly.
been where he was at that time. And, I mean, something else could have happened too, but I'm not saying that. But
That's
um,
the interesting thing about football too. There's always a lot of what ifs, especially when it comes to injuries. It's like, oh, if I stepped just a little more this way, I could have avoided this point of contact right here, which caused me to get injured. So it's always interesting how it works out. In football, it's like, what's the best way to describe it? It's like you're playing like roulette every play. It's like, okay, this could be the play that I get hurt, maybe not. We'll kind of see what happens here.
mhm, yeah, I'm surprised you haven't had more injuries, but
Definitely had my fair share. Just I've been luckily the broken foot was the most serious one for me, and I was definitely fortunate because it was an injury that I was actually able to play on. Now it wasn't fun to play on it. I will say that. So Kevin did refer to this. They put me in a walking boot during the week, so I wouldn't practice during the week. My whole week of practice, I was in the training room getting rehab. So it was just 3.5 hours straight of just straight rehab, and then we take the boot off. I go play the game. It feels like shit. I'm in excruciating pain the whole time. And then once the game is over, put the boot back on and act like nothing happened.
Yeah, that's really rough. I knew someone at my old workplace that he broke his foot and literally he just never really fully recovered. Like it just kept
Just always had a hobble, always had a limp, something
not
like
well,
that.
no, it wasn't like that, but it just always ended up causing him problems. And
Mhm.
so, you know, it's there's so many little bones in the foot, like but anyways.
No, exactly, exactly. And then talking about, Kevin's other theme, injury, coming back from injury. Now, you can probably relate to this as well. So, especially with it being a knee injury, you suffered a devastating knee injury yourself. So, do you feel like you can relate to Kevin's story? Like,
I
kind
was
of
gonna
getting.
say, so he was screaming out in pain like that. He must have did something different because mine wasn't painful.
Mhm.
Um, it was just more of like, holy shit, my
Just the
kneecap popped
realization.
out.
Yep.
Um, but yeah, I mean, so I guess I'll just briefly go over it. So I was rock climbing. I was pretty new at rock climbing. I'd only been rock climbing for a few months. I was doing this bouldering route. So for those who don't know, bouldering is when you don't have the harness, you're just climbing, free climbing up a wall. And there was this route that I had been like intermittently working on for a few weeks. And I decided to try it again. And I had started working out in the mornings because that was like increasing my strength a lot. And um, so I decided to try it out when I was stronger. And I got to the top. I got past this tricky part. That was the thing. I always had this tricky part. So for weeks I was working on this and I just couldn't get past it. But finally I got past this part, got to the top, put my hand on the last hold up at the top, and I just couldn't hold on, and I fell. It wasn't like a fall, it's not like I was not expecting to fall. Like I've fallen from that height a million times, but just the way that I fell that particular time, I turned around and like my knee popped out. And
And you
so,
basically landed like legs locked out. You're supposed to have like a slight bend.
well, yeah, so that's that was I never really learned how to fall properly. So I was always very stiff when I fell, and you're really supposed
Mhm.
to use your momentum and like roll back, like just kind of like almost do like a backward somersault. But I didn't
Yep.
do that, and landed on my butt, and I saw like my knee pop out. Um, but yeah, so like that was a long injury. Like I couldn't get surgery for 4 months because it was a pretty rare injury, and like they couldn't like I ended up having to get another surgeon because my first surgeon that was recommended to me wasn't experienced enough. Because I tore three of my ligaments like
Mhm.
completely, and then partially of the fourth ligament, and then like there was a few fractures and sprains and whatever.
And Kevin had
Or
the
strains.
weight as well because that some fluid built up, so they actually had to drain the fluid before they can even perform the surgery. So he had some
Mm.
setbacks with that.
Well, yeah, so you're kind of like it swells immediately. Like
Mhm.
within within 30 seconds it was swelling, I would say. Um but I mean, yeah, so waited 4 months and then couldn't walk on it for like 2 months. Was it 2 months? It was over 2 months, a little over 2
Mhm.
months. And then yeah, just like basically a full year before I was able to like really kind of, feel a lot better about like running and sprinting even, like
Well, then let's
yeah.
talk about when you're actually healthy again. Like when you're able to do that stuff again, I'm sure there must be some sort of mental block that stops you from, let's
Oh,
say you're running,
yeah.
like performing the way that you would have before. Like I'm
Even
sure there's
today.
always some hesitation.
Even today because yeah, like I mean, don't get me wrong, like my surgeon, I had a really good surgeon, really thankful for my surgeon, but it's never going to be as strong as it was. It was
Exactly.
perfect. It was perfect before I tore those ligaments, but now I have some dead person's ligaments in me, and like it's not the same. And uh so it is weaker. I noticed that, like, first of all, it's not nearly as flexible. Like, I have to
Mhm.
be like warmed up, and even then it's still not quite as flexible as my other knee. And then if it comes to like dancing, if it comes to like, just doing like pivot, like I have to be very careful with pivoting. Not that it's gonna like tear again, but like it could,
Mhm.
especially if if there's not enough, if the floor isn't like slippery enough or whatever. Like, yeah, I definitely. So even today, like, I still am very aware of it, and
Yeah.
I can feel that strain when I pivot, whereas in the other knee, I can't feel it. And then, like, even so, we went hiking the other day, and it was a longer hike. It was the longer hike that I've done in a while. And we were descending, and my right knee was sore from the
Exactly.
constant, but my left knee was fine. So, like, it's not that it can't do things, but it is weaker, it is less capable. And ultimately there are some things that I could probably like not never really do again, or really shouldn't do again, like
Mhm.
ski. Not that I skied very much to begin with, but yeah, I mean, it's definitely something that, I obviously don't want to do again and have to be very careful of.
No, exactly. And it's pretty surprising that Kevin was able to recover so fast from an injury like that and to not miss a beat. Obviously, got to play in some games as a true freshman at Wagner, didn't even have to redshirt, didn't have to do a medical redshirt, anything like that. And then
Let's
moving on,
Sorry. It's kind
you're
of his
all
job, right? Like,
exactly.
so as an athlete, that's your job, is to get back as quickly as possible. So,
Exactly. That's your main focus. That's your whole purpose is to be healthy, to be ready to play every single week. So now moving on, being an athlete, it can take a toll mentally. And, obviously Kevin alluded to this. It was just so random. It kind of hit him. Yeah, hit him randomly one day. He's not happy playing football at Wagner, so makes the decision to leave football altogether, transfer to Ramapo College in New Jersey, and switch to a completely different sport that he hadn't played since he was in high school, baseball. And you talk about sacrifice quite a bit. I mean, you sacrifice having 4 years of college paid for. You sacrifice that to go play. At a you go from Division 1 to Division 3, and you're paying your own way to play baseball there. But what was most important was it made him happy, and it probably set him up for success early on after college because he was probably in the right mental state. Because could you imagine just being depressed all 4 years of college, and then it's like, oh, here we go. Now I'm entering the real world after not even enjoying college. So
yeah.
it seemed like he had to take a step back in order to move ahead.
I mean, is it really a step back though if you're happy? And
That's a good
because
point.
what is success? Some people would say that success is being happy.
No, I
And
agree. I agree. If you're not
so,
happy in life, you're missing the whole point. If you're doing something that makes you miserable, at the end of the day, let's say you're on your deathbed and you just come to terms. You say, "Wow, I did not enjoy anything in my life. I did not have a happy life." It's like, so you failed. That's the whole point in life is to be happy. That's a very good point.
well, I don't want to say it's the whole point, but
Well, it's a very large point, without a doubt.
yeah.
So Kevin was a great guest. Our guest after Kevin, basically a similar theme. Scott Daniel. Scott was a so s- in my so our connection was we were at Eastern Kentucky together. Scott and I were obviously roommates, so very good friends. We actually never got to play together, which is pretty surprising. So Scott's career was pretty much already over by the time I got there. Now, the big thing that stood out to me with Scott was basically the loss in identity when his career was over due to his injury. Now, this is a common theme with basically all athletes. And with this theme, I want to refer to a movie, Rambo First Blood. So there's a scene in the movie when Colonel Troutman, this is at the end of the movie, Colonel Troutman's trying to get Rambo to, to surrender, like put his weapons down. So he's saying, "It's over, Johnny. It's over." And then Rambo looks back at him and he says, "Nothing is over. You can't just turn it off." Because Rambo was a Green Beret. He was a soldier. That's what he does. He wreaks havoc. He causes destruction. That's what he does. And he's right. You can't just turn it off. When you're an athlete, you can't just shut it off. It's always with you. So we all have an identity crisis when we're done playing the game. There's no doubt about it. So it's like, how do we move on? And Scott's kind of referring to what helped him move on. He had to move on from playing and then taking a leadership role as a coach on the team instead.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything you said that um yeah, as an athlete, like I didn't do football. I did cross country and track and I loved it for whatever reason.
Hmm.
But I mean, at the end it's like at the end of the season it's like what do I do now? Like and that's definitely really hard. I feel for Scott there. I mean, I feel more for him because I know that it was like his life and um
Exactly.
yeah, I'm sure that's really hard.
Especially because, for him, it was cut 2 years too short,
Yeah. And
because
especially if you're like good.
yeah, he played
So,
as a true freshman, played as a sophomore. Um, and the thing that made it more difficult for him was it was also during a tough time for that program. They're transitioning from coaching
that's
staffs.
right.
So, coach out with Coach Hood, in with Coach Elder, you're trying to impress the new coaching staff because what you've done in the past, what you've done with the old coaching staff, none of that matters. Every time a new staff comes in, first of all, they're trying to weed people out. Like, who are the people that don't belong here? Who are the people that aren't going to fit in my culture here? They're going to bring in their own people, which obviously, this happens to all of us. This is why a lot of people end up transferring. This is basically why I ended up transferring too. Like it's very common in the game. Whenever you have a new coaching staff, you have to prove yourself to them right away. And because Scott was not healthy, he wasn't able to do that. And unfortunately, there was a sense of urgency to show what he can do in front of the coaches that I think he pushed it. But I think he went out there a little too soon, which made his whole, his knee injury, his situation just much worse.
Well, the other thing too is like his knee injury, wasn't it like tendonitis or some
It was
form of
severe tendonitis,
so
and he
like
had
that's
he had to get
something
surgery to.
that's like something that you don't even really have control over. Like it's not
Mhm.
like it's just something that's, I mean, I don't someone else can speak to this. I don't know biology really well, but it's something that's like, you can't really fix it. Like it's always going to be there.
Mhm.
And it's not like, someone took you out or, you got in a car accident, something that could have been prevented. Like it's something that you literally have no control over. And that must be really frustrating to know that like there's really nothing you can do. And it's just gonna be there.
No, absolutely, and it's a tough injury too because this is definitely one it's gonna linger for the rest of his life. No,
Exactly.
no doubt
Yeah,
about it.
exactly. That's yeah. He's probably there's always gonna be some part of him that's being reminded of that every single day. Um, maybe. I know for me too, that even like every single day, like if I sit in a chair for too long, I have to straighten out my knee. And it's
Hmm.
something that like I don't want to say I consciously think about it, but I subconsciously think about it like, oh, my knee, like, and it's something I never
Yep.
had to think about, but
Before, yeah.
literally every single hour of the day, like I'm impacted. I'm sure for him it's like kind of the same thing. Like every day he's probably reminded of it and but I'm glad that he's
He's found his way. He found his
Yeah.
way. I mean, obviously, we all get a little lost at first. So I'll have to say, for me, I definitely had an identity crisis, especially after my first year when I was done playing. So at this point in my life, I was up living in Minnesota, but yeah, I got to say that was probably the worst year of my life. The first year, kind of getting over not being a football player anymore. I definitely struggled with that. It was, I had nights where I was like, dude, who the hell am I? It's like, I used to be this big bad football player. People used to respect
Big
me.
fan.
People people used to respect me. People would never talk smack or anything like that. And
People
it's
still
like
respect you, Tom,
it's
obviously.
like it's like it's like, this is the real world, man. You're not on the football field anymore. So it's definitely, it's a hard adjustment. So first year was the toughest. It gets better. It just takes time. And I'm probably over it now. I mean, obviously,
No, you're not.
I'm still obsessed with the game. I love it, but I miss being with the guys. I miss being with a full team, 100 plus people with a common goal. Because we've referred to this in several different episodes. It's like, you're never going to have that same atmosphere in like a work setting. Like, you're never going to have all 100 people together, one common goal, and basically you're only as strong as your weakest link. So everyone, we pick each other up, we carry each other to achieve our goal. And obviously in the workplace that doesn't happen. It's like, oh, if you're falling behind, we're just going to let you go on your own, fend for yourself.
Yeah, I guess, depending on where you work, but yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, there's
Exactly.
definitely I mean, I can only imagine football locker room, like, that must have been so awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, there's
There's probably
there-
there's nothing like that, I'm sure.
there's a lot of memories that you'll never forget from there. Like, we I don't know, just
Just a
think about
bunch of boys being all silly.
just guys being dudes in the locker room. And yeah, like, that's a good point. Being silly in the locker room, like, you've seen that video of so it was after a
Videos.
workout. Yeah, there's several videos that you've probably seen of just me and hanging out with people in the locker room, but there's that one in particular that got 7,000 views on Twitter. It was the one with it was after a Friday lift, and Alex Shelton, who was a long snapper with us, he captioned it, and it was like, that Friday feeling or something like that. And then EKU football ended up like retweeting it, and then all the coaches ended up retweeting it, and it was me and a couple of the guys singing Alicia Keys' "Girl on Fire." So it's like, just silly moments like that. You remember that for the rest of your life.
Yep.
Oh yeah. And then our next guest was Skid. So very similar to Scott in that struggle with the transition from coaching staffs. So Skid ultimately ended up having to change positions with the changing coaching staff, because new D line coach comes in. It's like, hey, this is a different type of defense. Skid, honestly, you're not the right player for this defense. So you're probably never going to start here. Your time at Eastern's probably done. It's basically like, hey, you're probably going to have to transfer because you're not right for this defense. So Skid makes I don't know if you want to call it a sacrifice, but it's a tough decision to switch from defense to offense. I know because I had to do this quite a few times in my career. Especially when I was at UConn, they could never figure out what position they wanted me at. Was recruited as a D lineman, got switched to O line before my first camp, switched to D line when I got put on scholarship. Then when I transferred, EKU was like, no, we want you to play O line. So it's just the
I didn't
constant
realize
back
it
and
was that
forth.
often.
It was a lot.
Hmm.
EKU was the only place where I was an O lineman, and that was it. I never played D line there. But UConn, it was just like they couldn't make a decision. It was back and forth. So it's definitely frustrating switching from offense to defense. So I understand what Skid had to go through, but it was a sacrifice he was willing to make to be able to contribute out on the field, and a sacrifice he was willing to make in order to contribute as a leader to the team.
Yeah. I'm sorry, but I didn't watch that one or listen to it, so,
Oh,
um, I can't really
he's going to be so offended.
I'm so sorry, Skid. It's
Well,
a lot to listen to, but,
they're very long episodes too, very long episodes. But so Skid also, yeah, so similar to Scott in that, he has to prove a new coaching staff. You're transitioning everything that you've done with, Coach Hood. It doesn't matter anymore. You have to prove, the Coach Elders coaching staff. And then very similar to Scott, Skid's career was cut short, but only by a few games short. It's not like he missed a couple seasons. He only missed a few weeks, basically. But just the fact that you're a senior and you don't get to go out on your own terms. He ends up tearing his ACL literally a week after he tore his MCL. He was playing on a torn MCL during the week he tore his ACL.
well, yeah, then he probably probably shouldn't be doing that. I mean, that's just gonna make the rest of the knee weaker, but
You're going to overcompensate somewhere, right?
yeah. I
You
mean,
know,
I understand, like, you know, they make you play anyway, but
well, it's not that they make you play. It's you feel guilty for not playing. You feel guilty for missing time. Like you feel like you're letting the team down when you're not out there. So I understand that. That's honestly that's why I always played through injury, is because I felt extremely guilty not being there for my teammates. Not going through you know a, sh- a tough practice, not going through a very tough physical game, not being there with my teammates. It would tear me apart. So I completely understand why it's kind of in our minds like we have to play through injury because we cannot let our teammates down. Which is obviously in retrospect, now that we're a lot older, and some of us can probably like Skid and Scott, they can feel these injuries today. It's probably seems very very silly, but back then it was just that important to us.
yeah, it's not silly. I mean, you only have so many years in college, so
Exactly. It's and we find out, we may think back then like, hey, football's forever, but it's really not. And as Scott referred to and as Skid referred to, it's hard moving on. It's hard moving on, especially because you didn't go out on your own terms. So that definitely makes things a little tricky.
yeah.
And then the other two guests we had on. Well, actually, I can't forget about Dalton. So we had Dalton Dashna on as
Hi,
well.
Dalton. I love
so
you. I miss you too.
so we had a fantastic conversation with Dalton. The big thing I took from our episode with Dalton was making connections, getting out of your comfort zone, getting out of your bubble to understand someone who is completely different from you. Because we talk about this all the time. So there are people that never even leave their hometown. They're just comfortable there. They don't want to try to meet someone that's completely different from them. They don't want to try to understand anyone else. They're stuck in their own ways. You don't grow as a person like that. It is important for you to get out of your bubble, to have the courage, to be open minded, to want to get to know someone else.
Yeah, I obviously this episode was like slightly political, so it was I enjoyed listening to it. I could probably go off on a whole tangent, but but it's true. I feel like nowadays, well, first of all, people, and it's even worse now because of COVID. Like everyone's just in their own little bubble. Like
Mhm.
nobody wants to go out and do anything anymore. Nobody really goes to the movies anymore. Nobody wants to go outside because people are getting shot and whatever. Like it's a very different world, I-
Than just like
and
5 years ago. Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, it's like a whole different era. And but even worse, like people judge other people based, or they literally decide whether or not they like someone or not just based on a certain belief that that person has.
Mhm.
And it's like there is so much more to a person.
Yeah,
Like,
I mean, you don't always agree with everything. There's no
and
doubt about that.
if you could just try to understand where that person is coming from, like we have all lived different lives that have
Mhm.
shaped who we are, our belief system, like and not only have we lived different lives, but every single person interprets their own life events differently. And that's why you
Yeah.
can't say like, oh well that doesn't sound that bad. Like, but you're not them and they're not you. And so that's as far as I'll go with that. But
You're all good. You're all good. But yeah, and then another thing we talked about with Dalton was we kind of talked about accountability a little bit with him, and obviously, freedom and what freedom meant to him. And then the big thing was, victim mentality, because we see that a lot today, especially more often today. That just people playing the victim, and it's we can't do that. We have to take accountability, especially if we're in the wrong. We have to realize when we're in the wrong and
hmm
accept that. And in order to do that, you have to have an open mind. You're not always going to be right. I mean, yeah, am I? I'll admit it. I'm stubborn. I might be stuck in my own ways, but at least I know that. At least I admit that there's something wrong there.
I mean, it's not wrong, but
Yeah, but
being self-aware and yeah.
exactly, exactly.
What was
But
the other
then,
thing he talked about was like loss of values,
yeah, the absence of values.
absence of values.
hmm Just yeah, I guess people just kind of like not really having like their own beliefs, their own like thoughts anymore. That just everything's kind of
Well, you know why? So it's because we've kind of again, COVID made this worse. Like there's usually two extremes, and the reality is that most of the people are in the middle. Like most of them, a lot of people either don't care or
Mhm.
like they believe in like the gray area. Like they can see both sides, understand both sides
And they're
because
afraid to speak up because you're gonna get just shunned for speaking up about
well, right, because nobody wants to be classified as either extreme.
exactly.
And so they're like, well, like I'll just say nothing, but it's really bad for our society because that is why we have people like the Trumps and the Bidens that are so extreme that really they don't even represent the party that they represent. Like they're just such to an extreme. But anyways, I know. That's all I'll say.
That's all we'll get into for politics here. This is a football podcast. But anyways, moving on. So our next two guests were very similar, um, basically in the qualities that they brought, especially to any locker room. So we had L.J. Scott and Tim Boyle. So the main themes with both of them, I would have to say, leadership was definitely one. Um, so L.J. was a guy. He always wanted to set the example. He wanted to be the example. Like he wanted coaches to be like, "Hey, you see the way LJ's doing high knees? That's how you should do high knees." It's like he needs and he would be offended if he wasn't used as an example because he just had that. I lost my train of thought, but
Well, he
that's just the
wasn't
way he
always like
carried
that
himself.
though, right? Like didn't he have that talk with Tim and then Tim was kind of like, "Oh, thanks for being there,
Yeah, yeah.
LJ." And
So
so
it was more so for LJ to be able to speak up, to have the hard conversation with teammates, um, because yeah, so this was a it's the context behind this. We already shared this. This was a player led meeting, so there are no coaches there. So this was after a very probably the most embarrassing loss, or one of the most embarrassing losses in my time at Eastern Kentucky. We got annihilated by a team that we had no business losing to. And it was a huge wake up call for us. And this one game basically derailed our entire season. And we had a player led meeting to try to figure out, like, to try to light a fire in us again. Like, hey, like, what the hell happened? Like, we need to move on from this. How do we move on? What do we need to do to get better? What do we need to do to avoid this? And I'm going to be completely honest. We all know this. The meeting did not go as planned. It did not go well. We had teammates some teammates took turns speaking in front of the whole group, and we had people just bashing the team. Like, we had a couple guys up there. It's just like, hey, let's be real. We suck right now. We're not a good team, and it was awful because I looked over and I see Tim just burying his head in his hand. It's like, what is happening? This was not what this meeting was about. And yeah, like, so, and I'll admit it, I mean, I just like LJ, I was kind of in the back corner, just like listening to it all. And I was just like, I'm not getting involved in this meeting. Um, but yeah, I mean, that had a huge influence on LJ when Tim was like, thanks for being there. And, that lit a fire in LJ. He was like, hey, never again. It all comes back to accountability. Like, we're going to hold ourselves accountable. We're going to hold the whole team accountable.
Yeah. I can't speak too much to that because we kind of dominated in cross country and track.
Oh, there you go. There you go.
But yeah, I'm sure it was interesting situation.
Oh no, exactly. Exactly. And then, so going to Tim, I know you probably have a lot you want to share about Tim's episode. Seemed like that was the one that really impacted you the most.
Hmm.
So I'll let you get to it.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess, we had a lot of great guests, or you had a lot of great guests. It's not my podcast, but I would say that Tim's definitely stood out the most because, first of all, he's very well spoken. I think so. He was very like was eloquently was able to like say everything he had to say, um, which makes a difference too. Uh, but for him, the big thing with Tim is that people hate on him.
Hmm.
If you don't know, so he is now the new NFL quarterback for the Jets, to play as Aaron Rodgers' backup. But people have not said nice things, and I don't even remember. I just remember like it was what like a year ago. You were showing me this podcast, and
It was
people,
after his first few starts with the Lions. Yep.
yeah, people were literally putting the shittiest words together that you possibly could in this podcast to describe Tim. Like I literally I don't even remember what they say. I don't even care to remember what they say, but I just
Hmm.
remember thinking like, and I think I actually said it out loud. I was like, I hope he doesn't hear these things. Like this is first of all absurd that people are like saying these things because it's just I couldn't believe it, honestly. It
Hmm.
was like uncomfortable for me to listen to. And um I think, I mean, I don't know if I should like go into my personal experience, but I think the reason why it hits me so hard is because Tim is obviously this great person. Like he's very successful, and whether or not you think he's a good football player, he's still in the NFL, which means he's a good football player. Like
Exactly.
there's a reason why he got there, and um, probably making millions of dollars a year. Like he's got a good family. Like he's obviously, very successful person in general, and he's happy and he's living his dream life. So, first of all, F all of them. um, but I guess I just connect with that a lot because, like, I was bullied a lot in high school and some in middle school too. And a lot of it didn't come back to me. But I knew it was happening. And I know, like, my sister stuck up for me multiple times. And but I know it was bad because, like, one of the perpetrators had reached out to me years after he graduated high school and basically confessed and said how haunted he was by it and, like, just, was begging for forgiveness basically. And, um,
But you know what Tim said?
what?
Tim said that, anyone who's just putting you down, it's just because you're in a better position than they are.
Well, yeah, but I mean, it just, I think what really got me is like the strong mindset that he has to just, because there's so many people that will never reach their full potential because, they believe what people say about them, and they just never amount to what they could be because people think that they suck, or they think that they're stupid, or they think that
Mhm.
they're a joke. And so that's why what Tim had to say, like, even though I feel like I have a pretty strong mindset, because even though I definitely have a big chip on my shoulder and feel this need to like prove myself to those people that, for whatever reason thought that I didn't deserve an amazing man, or didn't deserve, an amazing life or whatever, like
Where's this amazing man?
it's my boo-boos.
Oh, oh,
He's right here. And
oh,
he's there.
oh man.
Yeah, I mean, like, well, that's what a lot of it was about. But anyways, so, and it bugs me that I have this huge chip on my shoulder, and that like a lot, because I'm not even like on social media much anymore, but like I know that part of the reason like why I want to share good things is because I want those people to see and be like, damn, like we were wrong about her. And
But you know what? That doesn't even
I
matter.
know.
It
I
doesn't even
know.
matter.
And that's what so that was something else that I really like that Tim said, was that, and this has happened to me before too. Like, so when I was in college, literally my very first week, I just met my suite mates, and for whatever reason, they thought that I was like stupid or something. Like, they literally, like, for whatever, they thought that I wasn't as intelligent. I'm like, you literally just met me. Like, you have no idea. I don't even know how smart I am. Like, you definitely have no idea how smart I am. And there was this girl who, like, so she would ask me, like, after every single test, after like every single paper, she would ask me what my grade was. And that fueled me I kicked ass my freshman year and aced like all my classes, like every single time, including the first time that she asked, my grade was higher than hers. And that's what fueled me. But this is why I like what Tim said, because he said it's an empty well. You're pulling motivation from someone who, first of all, does not care about you.
Mhm.
All these people that are trash talking Tim, they don't give two shits about him. They don't know him personally. Like, you're drawing motivation from people who you should not be drawing motivation from. That
You should
literally, at the
draw it
end of the
from the ones
day,
that actually do care, the ones that do matter, the people that are actually in your life.
yeah. And then like the other
And then
thing is,
internally
what do
as
you
well. You know,
yes.
you should fuel yourself.
But like, what are you gonna do when these people no longer exist? Like, what if you become really good at football, and like, or you become really good at whatever it is, like, and those people are no longer bashing you anymore? What are you gonna pull motivation from if nobody is putting you down anymore? So yeah, you have to have it. It has to come from within. It has to come from,
That's where it should start. It's like, yeah, you can use those external factors, but you know, it should start from within.
yeah. But yeah, so that whole episode, I loved everything that Tim had to say. I thought he said it so eloquently, um and I just really connected because I feel like, not on this, thankfully not on the same scale as, he has. Obviously, he has way more people that know who he is, and
Hmm.
and
I
have
mean,
to
the
witness.
average NFL fan knows who he is. So,
Yeah. So, I mean, but yeah, I definitely really
which is
liked what he had to
it's
say.
still a little weird for me to get used to because I don't know. To me, it's like, oh, it's Tim.
Yeah.
But yeah, well, awesome. We are at that 49-minute marker. We went through all the guests, so it's about time to wrap this one up. Do you have any final thoughts overall? So you know, how do we start this podcast? I asked you overall, what did you think of all the guests overall? And you're like, wait to ask this till the end. So I'm asking it now.
Mhm.
Final thoughts.
Well, I mean, first of all, I think they were all like actually really good guests. Like, they all took it seriously.
Hmm.
Um and they all like had really great things to say, really great things to bring to the table. I feel like a lot of them were vulnerable, in certain ways, and like that's the best way to first of all connect with people and make people want to first of all watch the podcast, but like also just hear what these people have to say, because let's be honest, a lot of people don't know who these people are except for maybe
Hmm.
Tim. So, you know, like being able to connect with them, and yeah, I think they all had really good stories, and they were able to explain pretty well their situation, and um if I had I was going to ask you what your favorite episode would be. I know that's
They're
much
all
harder
my
for
favorite.
you,
I can't choose.
but
They're all my boys. You can choose because, well, I think, well, personally, you only know one of them, or two of them rather. Sorry, three of them. You do know three of
yeah.
them
Yeah,
because you know
Skid,
Dalton, you
Scott,
know
and
Scott,
Dalton. Yep.
yeah. But okay, so but you can probably choose. What was your favorite?
I mean, damn, does this thing keep going black? I'm sorry. I keep forgetting to move my mouse. Um, yeah, I mean, obviously, like Tim, I've just everything he had to say, like I just really connected with, and I thought he said it so well. Dalton's was really fun to listen to, though, and of course, like I'm closer with Dalton than I am with anyone else. So,
Closer with
um,
Dolphin.
Did I say Dolphin? Dalton Dashnaw.
Yep.
Um, so I mean, yeah, I obviously love Dalton. He's always got so many great things to say and interesting things to say. So I enjoyed listening to that episode as well. But I mean, they were all great. I liked them all. Um, Skid, I did listen to your more recent one about motivation.
There
I
you go.
listened to
Okay.
about half of it.
So she did listen to some of it, Skid,
uh, but yeah, it's hard to listen to all of them. I have not listened to all of
and
them,
they're
but
all like an hour long. So yeah,
yeah,
it's yeah.
but they're all great to listen to.
Oh, thank you,
Highly recommend.
thank you. Well, everyone, winning mindset formula signing off.